Morning, boys and girls. Mr. Martinez here again. Today is Monday, April 20th, and today we're going to be focusing on a book study, a book titled Who Was Nelson Mandela by Pam Pollock. And so today we're going to be shifting gears a little bit. We're going to be shifting into a new unit. Unit 4 is now over. Environmentalism unit is now finished. You should be focusing on your environmentalism journal, which you're keeping track of every single day for the next 3 weeks, due on May 8th. That's going to be a Friday, okay? Make sure to do that every single day so that you're not rushing at the very end. Make sure you're following the rule brick that was posted on that assignment so that you are getting a good grade as well. Because I am seeing people submit some pictures, and some of those pictures are not following the rule brick. I'm seeing you guys not writing complete sentences. I'm seeing you guys using one-word responses. You guys need to go back and make sure you're doing this correctly, okay? If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me about that. Nothing is due yet until May 8th. Got it? Awesome. So let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be focusing on a reading from a book called Who Was Nelson Mandela? This reading is the start of a new unit, Unit 5. And so what we're starting is Unit 5 book study, Who Was Nelson Mandela by Pam Pollock. Okay, you can find this reading on the post today, so I'm just going to post this in the general post and feed today. But you can also find this underneath the Files tab. So if you go to Teams and you're underneath my class, and you go to Files, you can see Lesson 15 materials. So once you're here, you're going to see all the folders that have been uploaded for the year, and you're going to find Lesson 15 materials. In that, you're going to find the reading. Again, you don't need to go all the way in here to find this. I'm going to post this on the general post page, so you should see it pop up right away. But in case you're having any trouble, try this method, and you should be able to get access to the reading. Once you click this, 1 second, give time to load. Notice I'm having malfunctions, and this is normal. This is going to happen to you. So I clicked it, and it took a little while to actually do anything. I just waited. So now, still kind of just waiting because, again, Teams runs a little slow sometimes. The internet runs a little slow sometimes. So here's a good example. The internet's running really slow, and here it is. So you're going to see 6th grade hybrid social studies, world cultures, Unit 5 book study, the title of the book, the author, distance learning resources, and you should see all the chapters to the book. Sir, can I read the entire book already? Go for it if you want to, but don't worry. We're only going to be giving you small chunks in questions each day. Okay, so for example, today, after we're done reading chapter 1, you're going to go into the assignments for today, and you're going to be working on chapter 1 questions. Don't forget, you also need to be doing attendance for today, so you're going to be seeing 2 assignments pop up, attendance lesson 15 and lesson 15 chapter 1 Nelson Mandela book study. You're going to see a link, click that link, it's going to take you to a forms page, and it's going to give you 4 questions, all open-ended with some images. The images are to help you organize them in your head or on a piece of paper, because originally this was supposed to be done on a packet. Okay, so I'll walk you through that as we read. But right now what I want to do is turn back to your reading and read this together. So at this time, if you would like to open up your reading and read this on your own, go for it. You don't need to listen to me read this. This is totally up to you. But if you want that help, if you want that support, I am here for you, and I'm going to read the book study to you guys now. Okay, so you guys should see something like this. And we're going to start with chapter 1, actually the introduction to chapter 1, titled Who Was Nelson Mandela? Let's go ahead and get started. In the heart of Thembuland in South Africa was a grand house. The local people called it the Great Place. Here lived Jongdindaba, who ruled as king. The Great Place was his royal home. On this day, in 1927, Jongdindaba was holding a tribal meeting. The men talked about important matters. Also in the room was a young boy who had come to live in the Great Place only a short time before. He was 9 years old. After the boy's own father died, the king had adopted him. The boy listened to the men talk and watched his foster father. The king did not speak. He listened. He thought everyone deserved a voice in his kingdom, no matter who they were. Then, when he sensed that the people had said all they needed to, the king gave his opinion. This approach was very different from the way the rest of the country of South Africa was ruled. South Africa is a country at the bottom tip of Africa, the continent. Remember, Africa is a continent. South Africa is a country in Africa. It is almost twice the size of Texas. Once, black kings had ruled South Africa. Then, white settlers came from Europe. #European colonization. They grabbed land for themselves and took control of the country. By the late 1800s, black South Africans had no voice in the government. By the time the boy came to live with his new foster father, there were about 6 million people in South Africa, and about 4 million were black. And yet, they weren't truly citizens of their own country. They couldn't vote. They could only live where the government allowed them to live. Even kings like Zongdindaba had no real power. As the 9-year-old watched his foster father's meeting, he dreamed of a different South Africa, one where people of all colors had a voice, where everyone was free and equal. When he grew up, he hoped to make this happen. The boy's name was Nelson Mandela. One day he would change South Africa. One day he would change the world. Here he is. Here's the king talking with his tribe. The boy's name had been Rolilala. In his native language, the word meant tree shaker, but it also meant troublemaker. The boy's father was chief of people called the Thembu tribe. Like many chiefs, he had more than one wife. This is called polygamy. Okay, so if you want to know the academic vocabulary for that, having more than one wife is called polygamy. This is normal for ancient native tribes to do this, so this is not out of the ordinary for Nelson's father to have more than one wife at this time. Remember, it's 1920s. So like many of the chiefs in Africa at the time, Nelson's father had more than one wife. He also had 13 children. The boy's mother, Nelson's mother, was known as Nosekeni Fanny. This was Nelson's father's third wife. Rolilala was the first of 4 children. He was born on July 18, 1918. At that time, South Africa was ruled by the British. The white government strictly controlled what black South Africans did and where they went. Black people had to stay in their own neighborhoods and villages, which were called homelands. If a black person left his homeland for any reason, he had to carry a special pass that gave him permission to travel, even if it was only to work in a white neighborhood for the day. A black person without a good reason for being in a white neighborhood would be arrested. When Rolilala's father ignored a summons by the British government to appear in court, he was stripped of his title as a chief and lost most of his land and cattle. The boy and his mother then went to live in the village where she'd been born. The boy went to a school run by Christian missionaries from Europe. For his first day at school, his father had given him a pair of trousers, which are shorts that were cut off at the knee to replace the blanket dyed in red clay that he had worn at home. When the boy got to the school, his teachers gave him something else, a Western name. From that day on, Rolilala would be called Nelson Mandela. Nelson shared 3 small huts with his mother and younger sister. He brought sheep and calves to and from the pasture. His favorite game was stick fighting, a traditional South African sport that is a bit like sword fighting. Players hold 2 sticks, one in each hand. They try to strike each other while blocking at the same time. Nelson was a champion in his village. It was always a special time when his father visited the family. However, during one of the home visits, Nelson's father became sick and died. Not only was his father gone, but Nelson was no longer living in the village with his sister and mother. He was going to have a new foster father, Zongdindaba. Nelson and his mother walked west from the village, carrying all of Nelson's belongings. They walked all day on rocky roads when they arrived. Nelson couldn't believe his eyes. He had never seen a home as big as this one. A fancy car drove through the open gate. The man who stepped out was short and heavy and wore a European-style suit. This was Zongdindaba. Although Nelson's new world interested him, it was scary being in a strange place all alone. Luckily, Zongdindaba had a son named Justice, who was 4 years older than Nelson. The boy hunted with slings, explored the countryside, and raced horses. Nelson went to a better school than he had in the village. He studied English history and geography, but he learned the most by going to meeting with the tribal elders. Nelson claimed that one day he might be a great leader like his foster father. Nelson loved to listen to stories of Africa. The Europeans arrive. In the 15th century, which are the 1400s, European nations were sending great ships all over the world. The eastbound ships that were headed for Asia usually passed around the bottom tip of Africa's continent near South Africa. They stopped in what is now known as South Africa to restock on food and water. In 1647, a Dutch shipwrecked on the southwest coast. The surviving sailors liked the area so much they stayed and built a fort. A fort's like a military outpost. So many Dutch came as settlers. They pushed the native people off their land. The Dutch formed their own colony, a community in Africa under the Dutch rule. Then the Europeans discovered gold and diamonds in South Africa. That made the land even more valuable. In the 18th century, which is the 1700s, the British took over. Many Dutch settlers pushed farther into Africa's lands to get away from the British. In 1902, after the British and Dutch fought, South Africa's colonies belonged to the British. And so this is all a part of European colonization. So going back, we left off on where he said, Nelson loved to listen to stories of Africa. Heroes of the past, the men who fought against the Dutch and the British. In these stories, black South Africans were ruled by their own kings like Jongtindaba. When the Europeans came to Africa, the tribal elders said they had the Bible, and we had the land. They said, let us pray. We closed our eyes. When we opened them, we had the Bible, and they had the land. So now that you're done reading chapter 1, what you're going to be doing is going to the questions in your assignment for the day. That's going to look like this. You should see lesson 15, chapter 1, Nelson Mandela book study, 6th grade hybrid pre-AP World Cultures 2020, and a picture of Nelson Mandela on the left. First question is asking, how was Rolihlahla, remember Nelson Mandela, that's his name, how was Rolihlahla's life similar to Naya? And Naya is the main character in A Long Walk to Water, if you don't remember. We did read the book A Long Walk to Water, where Naya and Salva struggled to get water. And so I'm asking you to compare similarities and differences between Rolihlahla and Naya. Now, this is digital, so it's a little harder for you to do this on the Venn diagram like this. So you can do this on a piece of paper and then type your response in a complete sentence here. Okay, so one thing I could say is that one similarity is they both struggled and had to travel long distances because of hardship. One being a war for Salva and Naya's life, and then the other one being father's death in Nelson's life, and his mother and him having to walk to a new tribe, and then him being completely surprised by the house and the car and everything like that. And so that was one thing we can put as a similarity. Another similarity we definitely need to write down, and you should include in your answer, is European colonization. Both of them are experiencing hardships or difficulties because of European colonization. A lot of the things that they're experiencing are because of the things that happened caused by Europe hundreds of years ago. It may not make sense, but it all connects one way or the other. Question 2 is asking you to break down this image here. And so it says, consider 3 ways that Europeans influence Rolihlahla's life. Give specific evidence to support your claims. In the organizer below, which is this organizer here, give your first claim. So basically, this is a graphic organizer. You need to tell me, how did Europeans influence Rolihlahla's life? 3 times. Then you need to give me 3 pieces of evidence and the page number. Okay? So what I did was I broke this down 3 times. So your first answer, you're going to write down here with your evidence here, and the page number here. And so once you're done doing that, this is what it should look like. One way that the Europeans influenced Rolihlahla's life was by giving him a Western name, and then I put according to the text, and then I'm going to give my evidence there, whatever my evidence is, and the quote, and then the page number. You'll do that 3 times, 2 and then 3 times, and that should be it. You hit submit and you're done for the day. That is all I have for you guys today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Yeah, have a great day, guys. Bye.